They marched into the mist. 5,000 men, veterans of Rome, hardened soldiers who had crushed rebellions, crossed rivers, and faced death more times than they could count. Their sandals struck the damp earth in rhythm, the sound of discipline echoing like a heartbeat across the gray hills of northern Britannia. The air was thick with fog, curling through the trees, swallowing the line of men until it seemed as if the earth itself were closing over them. Their armor glinted dully, wet from the cold drizzle, their shields heavy against their shoulders. At the front, the golden eagle standard rose high, gleaming faintly even in the gloom. To Romans, that eagle was not just a banner. It was their soul, their pride, their very existence. To lose it was to die in shame. They followed the call of duty. Orders had come. A rebellion had risen in the wild lands beyond the frontier. Rome's enemies, painted tribesmen, the Picts, had struck hard, vanishing into forests, ambushing patrols, leaving Roman bodies rotting in bogs. And so the Ninth marched north, out of the safety of Eboracum, out of the known world, into a land Rome had never truly tamed. The forest closed around them, dark and dripping, branches tangled above, blocking out what little light the weak sun gave. Every man knew this land was hostile. Every man remembered the stories, tribes who painted their bodies in blue woad, screaming like spirits of the underworld as they charged from the trees. Ambush fighters who knew every path, every swamp, every hidden pit. Men who would rather die 1,000 deaths than bow to Rome. But the Ninth had seen worse. They had marched against Boudica herself, years earlier, when flames consumed Roman Britain and rebels butchered entire towns. They had bled for Rome in Spain, in Germany, in Gaul. The legion was scarred but proud, carrying both honor and the memory of defeat. And so they kept their formation tight, their eyes forward, their trust in discipline and steel. Rome, after all, was eternal. A single tribe could not break an eagle. Yet, as they pushed deeper into the unknown, the silence grew heavier. No birds called, no animals stirred, only the crunch of boots, the rattle of armor, the labored breath of men marching toward a fate they could not see. Some whispered that this land itself was cursed, that druids had spilled blood upon the earth, binding the soil with Roman deaths, that no army could walk here and survive. Others laughed at such tales, but they laughed softly, nervously, as if afraid the trees might hear. Still they marched, hour after hour, day after day. Camps were built, fires lit, watchmen set. And yet, with each passing mile, Rome seemed farther away. Civilization slipping into memory. The familiar orders of the centurions, the ringing drills of the camp, all swallowed by the endless mist. Men who had stared down swords now felt unease in their bones. An enemy more suffocating than battle, silence. And then, the Ninth Legion was gone. No survivors. No broken remnants staggering back to warn of disaster. No shattered shields or fallen standards found in the mud. They vanished, as if the earth had opened and swallowed them whole. As if the gods themselves had wiped them from existence. Home witted, home distant. But no message ever came. And in that silence, questions began to spread. What had become of the Ninth? Were they slaughtered in a single night by painted warriors? Betrayed by their own officers? Did they mutiny, throwing down their eagle to vanish into the wilderness? Or did something far darker consume them? An empire that prided itself on order, discipline, and eternal memory suddenly faced the impossible. A legion erased. What force could wipe out 5,000 of Rome's finest, leaving not even a whisper behind? What curse had the Ninth carried into the mist? And why, even now, does history itself refuse to answer? The Ninth Legion was not just an army. It was a name carried in blood and iron, a force that once made the enemies of Rome tremble. Long before they marched into the mist of Britannia, they had carved their reputation in the dust and soil of foreign lands. Their story began centuries earlier, under Augustus himself, when the legions of Rome pushed into Hispania. The tribes that were fierce, stubborn, refusing to bend their necks to Rome's yoke. Yet the Ninth fought them with relentless ferocity. Hill forts fell, valleys burned. Cities that once resisted now bowed to the eagle. Rome praised the ninth, and their fame grew. But glory never came without scars. When they were sent to the Rhine frontier, the ninth learned the true price of war. In the forests of Germania, they faced an enemy that was savage, unpredictable, and unyielding. Night raids cut through their camps. Ambushes struck from the trees. For every victory, there was a wound that did not heal. Still, the ninth endured. They bled for Rome. They killed for Rome, and they carried Rome's name farther and farther. Then came the rebellion that would change their destiny forever. The year was 60 AD. Britannia burned. The warrior Queen Boudica rose with a fury that shook the empire. Her army, hundreds of thousands strong, swept across Roman towns like a firestorm. Cities fell. Thousands of Romans were slaughtered. Temples burned. The rebellion was so vast, so fierce, that even hardened soldiers whispered that the gods had abandoned them. The ninth was sent to crush her uprising, but they underestimated the storm. Somewhere along the roads of Britain, surrounded by rebels who fought like demons, the ninth was torn apart. Trapped, ambushed, overwhelmed, they fell in the mud and blood of Britannia. The rebels hacked them down without mercy. The legion's eagle, their sacred symbol, was nearly lost. Thousands died. The ninth was shattered. Rome rebuilt it, yes. New recruits filled its ranks. New commanders took control. But the shame of that defeat lingered like a shadow. In Rome, glory was eternal, but so was dishonor. Other legions whispered. Other generals remembered. The ninth carried that wound like a curse. And yet they endured. For decades after, they remained stationed in Britain, keeping order along a land that never truly submitted. They built forts, patrolled the wild countryside, fought skirmishes with painted tribes. They regained some pride, but the old scar never truly healed. Soldiers told stories at night, of comrades lost to Boudica, of brothers buried in shallow graves, of the shame that clung to their eagle. The legion's veterans grew old. Younger men took their place, but the memory passed down from cohort to cohort. Even recruits who had never seen Boudica carried the burden of her ghost. For the ninth, victory was never enough. Their name always came with a question. Can a legion so stained ever truly stand unbroken again? That question grew louder in the reign of Emperor Hadrian. The empire was at its height, stretching from deserts to mountains, seas to forests. Rome was unchallenged, yet its edges bled. In distant Parthia, the eastern frontier seethed with war. In Dacia, Rome had won a brutal campaign, but at immense cost. And here, in Britannia, the north resisted with endless fury. The ninth was chosen to hold this frontier. But was it loyalty, or was it a test? Perhaps the emperors remembered their shame. Perhaps they believed the ninth still had something to prove. Or perhaps they were sent to the edge of the world not as guardians, but as sacrifices. In the cold camps of northern Britain, soldiers of the ninth would have sharpened their blades by firelight, staring into the dark trees. They knew their history. They knew their burden. They knew that Rome gave glory but demanded blood in return. When the order came to march north against the tribes, they obeyed without hesitation. Centurions barked commands. Standards lifted. Shields slammed into formation. The eagle gleamed faintly against the pale sky. 5,000 men, scarred by history, bound by shame, determined to prove their name once more. But history has a cruel way of repeating itself. For if the ninth had once been destroyed by rebellion and humiliation, could the gods allow them to escape such a fate again? Could scars from the past have cursed the future? And did these men, marching in a mist, know they were not simply facing another campaign, but destiny itself, Britannia? To Rome, it was a prize won through blood and stubborn conquest. Yet to those who lived there, it was a land untamed. Beyond the southern cities and stone-built villas, beyond the roads Rome had carved across the countryside, lay a world that did not bend. The north. It was a place of endless forests, bogs that swallowed men whole, and hills cloaked in mist. The tribes who lived there did not fear Rome. They were born in the cold, hardened by the land, masters of terrain that broke legions apart. These were the Picts, painted in blue woad, their bodies marked with symbols of war and spirit. To Roman eyes, they were savages. To themselves, they were defenders of a world older than empire. The Ninth Legion knew this land well. They had fought skirmishes here before, clashing with raiding parties who struck fast and melted away like shadows. Night after night, watchmen on the ramparts of Roman forts saw fires glowing faintly in the hills, beacons, signals, warnings. The frontier was never safe. No patrol returned without fear of ambush. No road was ever truly secure. And still, Rome commanded order. The Ninth had been stationed at Eboracum, modern York, a bastion of Roman power in the north. From its gates, orders came. A rebellion had stirred again in the wild lands. The governor demanded a show of force. The Ninth would march north, crush the uprising, and remind the tribes of Rome's strength. Imagine the morning they left. The sound of horns breaking the dawn air. Centurions shouting men into formation. The eagle lifted high, its golden wings glinting in the pale light. The legionaries filed out, rank by rank, a river of steel and discipline flowing into the mist. Citizens watched them go, some with pride, some with unease, for they knew the North did not forgive. The march was long, across fields slick with rain, through forests where the canopy turned day into twilight. Shields clashed softly as men shifted the weight on their shoulders. Spears and swords clinked with each step. Pack animals groaned under the burden of supplies. But the rhythm of the legion was steady, unbroken. At night, camps rose in ritual precision. Ditches dug, stakes driven. Fiordi, the sounds of hammering and shoveling filled the air as order imposed itself on wilderness. Guards stood watch in pairs, peering into the black trees, listening for the snap of a branch, the whisper of movement. Somewhere out there, eyes were watching them, always watching. The men spoke quietly by the fires. Some boasted of Rome's invincibility, convinced no tribe could stand against them. Others muttered of omens, of the silence in the woods, of the memory of Boudica, whose ghost they swore still lingered in the soil of Britain. Soldiers laughed, but uneasily. Even laughter could not chase away the cold. Day after day, they pressed further into the north. And as they marched, the world seemed to close in. The land grew wilder, hills steeper, mists thicker. Sunlight became rare, and the damp clung to every cloak, every shield, every bone. Horses whinnied nervously. Scouts disappeared into the woods and returned whispering of strange signs, tracks that led nowhere, stones carved with symbols, trees stripped bare as if by unseen hands. The Ninth tightened their ranks. Discipline held, but beneath the surface, unease spread like a shadow. And then, somewhere beyond the frontier line, beyond the Roman forts, beyond the reach of safety, they were gone. No survivors limped back with tales of ambush. No messenger slipped through enemy lines to warn of disaster. The camps they built were empty, the fires cold, the ground disturbed only by rain and time. 5,000 men vanished. The people of Eboracum waited. Days passed. Weeks. No news. No word. Only silence. Rome, the master of the world, whose legions were the hammer of gods, faced the unthinkable, a legion swallowed whole. Theories grew. Some said the Picts fell upon them in numbers so great that the Ninth was annihilated in a single storm of blood and terror. Others whispered of betrayal, that officers within the legion turned against Rome, leading their men into rebellion. And darker still were the stories of curses, that Druids, once hunted and burned by the Romans, had called upon powers older than the empire itself to wipe the Ninth from existence. Rome's response was strange. Their records grew quiet. Mentions of the Ninth began to vanish, their name scrubbed, their legacy buried, as though the empire itself wanted to forget. But forgetting is dangerous, because a name erased does not vanish. It haunts. And in the haunted forests of the north, where mists coil like spirits, people swore they could still hear them. The tramp of sandals, The clash of shields. The ghostly march of men who never returned. The Ninth Legion had become a shadow. Whispers spread like smoke. Rome was not used to silence. When legions fought, reports came. When legions bled, survivors limped home. When legions died, the empire mourned and rebuilt. But the Ninth? Nothing. Not a man. Not a shield. Not even the shattered fragments of their eagle. So the stories began. The first was the simplest, that the Picts, wild and painted, had destroyed them utterly. Annihilation, swift and merciless, in a land where ambush was an art. Some imagined the Ninth encircled, trapped between bog and forest, with spears raining down from the shadows. They pictured the chaos, Roman formations breaking, centurions screaming, the eagle torn from trembling hands. In this tale, the mist hid only slaughter, and the silence that followed was nothing more than the silence of the dead. But not all believed it. Rome's legions were disciplined, trained to withstand even the fiercest onslaught. Could an army of tribesmen truly erase 5,000 Roman soldiers without trace? No stragglers, no prisoners, no trophies dragged back to boast of victory? Others whispered a betrayal, that perhaps it was not the tribes who destroyed the Ninth, but the legion itself. A mutiny. Soldiers tired of Britain's endless wars, of the cold rain and savage enemies, turning their backs on Rome. Some say they killed their officers, broke their standards, and vanished into the wilderness, becoming ghosts among the tribes. If that were true, the silence of Rome made sense. For what greater shame could there be than a legion of Rome turning traitor? Better to erase their name than admit such dishonor. Yet there were darker stories still, that the Druids, though hunted and massacred years earlier, had never truly been destroyed. In the sacred groves, they whispered old words, calling upon powers older than Rome itself. And when the Ninth marched north, they walked not into battle, but into ritual. Some said the earth drank them whole, swallowed as sacrifice. Others claimed the spirits of the land rose against them. The mists, the bogs, the forests themselves devouring the legion until nothing remained. Superstition grew. Soldiers in other legions spoke of a curse, that the Ninth carried shame from their slaughter under Boudica, and that the gods demanded balance. One defeat was not enough. Blood must be repaid in full. Even Rome's own records began to change. In official lists of legions, the Ninth's name faded, struck out, missing where it once stood with pride. Inscriptions stopped mentioning them. It was as if the empire itself had reached out and smothered their memory. Rome did not erase lightly. When it chose silence, it was deliberate. But why? Was it to hide weakness, to bury the truth of a devastating defeat? Was it to cover mutiny, a stain more dangerous than battle? Or was it something more, something Rome itself feared to name? The empire thrived on control. It built roads across the world, carved order into chaos, bent nations to its will. But the story of the Ninth whispered that there were still places where Rome could not rule, places where legions vanished, places where power ended. And silence is a dangerous enemy, for silence invites questions. Why did Hadrian, soon after the disappearance, order a wall to be built across northern Britain? A wall unlike anything Rome had ever raised before. 80 miles of stone and turf, stretching from sea to sea, bristling with forts and towers. Was it truly to keep tribes out? Or was it a monument to fear, a barrier against something Rome could not defeat? The Ninth Legion had vanished, but in their absence, a legend was born. A tale of defeat, betrayal, and curses that Rome tried to bury but could not kill. And perhaps that was the cruelest fate of all, to be forgotten by the empire you served and remembered forever by the shadows you left behind. The wall rose like a scar across the land. Stone, cold, endless. Hadrian's wall, 80 miles long, cutting Britain in two. Some said it was to keep the barbarians out. Others whispered it was to keep something in. For why else would Rome, the master of the known world, spend such wealth and labor to wall off a frontier? Why else build a fortress of stone where only mist and shadows lived? The timing was no coincidence. The ninth vanished. Then the wall rose. One silence, followed by another. Centuries later, whispers still haunted the ruins. Farmers swore they heard the tramp of phantom feet in the mist. Soldiers claimed to see men in battered Roman armor marching silently across the moors. Always 5,000, always vanishing before dawn. Ghosts of the ninth, cursed to wander where they fell. But Rome itself had already done its work. The official records erased them. The eagle standard was never found. Their names slipped into nothingness. To serve Rome was to serve eternity. Yet the ninth was given no eternity. They were given absence. And absence breeds fear. Historians debate still. Did the Picts destroy them? Did mutiny rot them from within? Did Rome hide a shame too great to admit? Or was it something older, darker, something that even the empire dared not put into words? Perhaps the truth lies buried beneath Britain's soil. Perhaps it was burned with their records. Or perhaps the ninth marched not only into the mists of Caledonia, but into legend itself. Because in the end, what is more powerful, a victory carved in stone or a mystery carved in silence? The Ninth Legion's fate is not written in history. It is written in whispers. And whispers, once born, never die. They say Rome conquered the world. But the Ninth Legion reminds us the world still had teeth. And sometimes it bit back.